American authorities have been abundantly clear on the issue of retaliation, that it's not a question of if, just when and where. Our senior correspondent Brian Stewart has this look at the United States strike back options.
The United States has struck back before after terrorist bombings, such as the 1998 destruction of its embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. But short, low-risk attacks by cruise missiles against targets in Sudan and Afghanistan failed to seriously damage the network of Osama bin Laden, or to deter future attacks from his or other groups. Poor intelligence, lone attacks without allies, so-called short, sharp attacks all brought more world ridicule than results. But this time, President George W. Bush is clearly planning something very different, a major, prolonged campaign, and he's insisting NATO allies and others are on side.
You all are doing.
I've been on the phone this morning, just like I was yesterday, and we'll be on this afternoon on the phone with leaders from around the world who express their solidarity with this nation's intention to rout out and to whip terrorism.
But if American planning now depends on strong support, how firm really is NATO's resolve? Military analyst Gwynne Dyer thinks NATO has no choice.
If they didn't get a serious Allied response, that's the end of NATO. This really matters to the United States. The United States in NATO has basically been doing other people's dirty work for 50 years. Now they want payback. And if they don't get it from the Europeans, and indeed from Canada, even if it's only token forces, then forget NATO. I mean, we paid our dues for 50 years. Where's the service?
Another key question. Would the U.S. public, so anxious to avoid military casualties in recent conflicts, support high-risk operations?
Now that this has happened on American soil, and they've taken thousands of deaths, my sense is that American public opinion has completely moved. That there is now the willingness to accept significant casualties if you can go after the right people. A large overseas military operation on the ground is, again, a possibility. The rules have changed. The safety catch is off.
A problem for military planners is deciding just what kind of campaign to plan for, or even where to act. Is bin Laden even the target, or is it a nation? Intelligence about terrorist groups and their state backers is notoriously weak. The potential area of operations is vast. Military planners have to look at possible strikes at terrorist bases in Iraq, Afghanistan, possibly even parts of Pakistan. It's a massive undertaking requiring good intelligence, so hard to get, and above all, help from allies. As of tonight, the U.S. has 2 carriers and a sizable fleet in the region, and aircraft at neighboring bases. These are ready for surgical strikes, but they need major reinforcements before any ground action could be taken. They will need at least limited support from some Arab nations, and NATO is lobbying hard to get it. There's some sympathy, says Kevin O'Brien, a director of London's International Centre for Security Analysis.
Many of these states, especially Egypt, Saudi Arabia, to a degree Jordan, are faced with their internal threats from Islamic fundamentalism of a militant nature, and are equally concerned that these types of dangers will continue to be visited on their own countries, as has happened in the past.
Few expect anything like the Gulf War. More likely a combination of heavy air attacks and limited special forces ground strikes. A mix planners are still struggling with.
I think there will be a multitude of responses. I think that in some ways they will be looking to take out, as they've expressed, the facilities, the ability to feed these terrorists in any terms. That means taking out their camps, taking out their networks, taking out any assets that they have, removing the personnel. The U.S. officials are talking very openly about the fact that they will remove the head and the body of these terrorist organizations. They're also talking not just about going after bin Laden's Al-Qaeda group network, but they are talking about going after other terrorist cells around the world.
Despite a public yearning in America for retaliation, few officers would contemplate even limited ground action inside Afghanistan, landlocked and hostile.
Well, they beat the British Empire at its height in the 19th century when the British invaded, and then they beat the Soviet Empire at its height in the late 20th century when they invaded. Those hills swallow armies up. So I don't think it's impossible to do if you had a good Pakistani base to do it from, and you were willing to take the casualties and to commit the scale of forces that are necessary, but it would be ugly. And it probably would be quite long, too.
There may be airstrikes in coming weeks, but U.S. officials seem determined to move more cautiously than first expected, as the complexities of fighting an often phantom enemy sink in. Anthony Cordesman is a former top Pentagon war planner and Washington strategic analyst.
I don't think any of us can anticipate anything. First, you don't have to strike everything at once. If we have a known critical target and an opportunity and a means, we can strike as soon as the time is ready. That doesn't mean we won't go on and strike again afterwards. And I don't think this administration will repeat the mistake of the Clinton administration, which is to always have one set of short symbolic strikes with no follow-up.
There will be major ship movements. More planes will be deployed along with troops. But the public is being prepared for a long, arduous haul. But given the mood of the United States right now, can Bush and the Pentagon really delay retaliation?
The pressure on Bush to do something now will be very much less if it's clear he's doing something big for later. You know, it's just, he has to be seen to be doing something, but if it's a big build-up to do a big thing when we're ready, there will be patience, I think.
For a shadowy war, shadowy plans. The Pentagon is giving few hints of future actions, except to promise a mighty blow somewhere, sometime. And military planners throughout NATO are also heavily involved in defensive planning, knowing that the retaliation will surely bring counter-retaliation from the terrorists. No one seems to be underestimating this military challenge at all. For The National, I'm Brian Stewart.